Who exactly was Prester John?
Well, that's a good question. Prester John is a legendary figure who lived somewhere during the time of the Crusades, 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s. It was the story of Prester John, who was a great Christian emperor, originally thought to be somewhere in the east, probably based upon a couple of Mongol tribes that converted to Nestorian Christianity. And it was believed that he was going to come to the aid of the West in fighting the Muslims. And stories were told about emissaries being received from Prester John to make alliance with the Western Christians against their common foe. He never really turned up, though. And in time, the focus of Prester John shifted, and it was considered that he was somewhere in Africa. Finally, the whole story got conflated with the Empire of Ethiopia, which was Christian. But that is the story of Prester John.
Well, it seems shrouded in mystery. What's your take on it? I mean...
Well, it also had him as a priest king.
Like, priest king?
Yeah,
wow.
Like Prester is priest. So he was both the king of some either Eastern or African people, and also a priest, like Melchizedek, the priest king of Salem. So a lot of people waxed very eloquent on the figure of Prester John, and he's been used in modern days, most notably in Charles Williams's novel, War in Heaven. But as to what the root of the legend was, the best surmise is that, as we know, there were several Mongol tribes that before most of the Mongols converted to Islam in Central Asia, were Christian. Now, in Mongolia, to this day, they're Tibetan Buddhists.
Mm-hmm.
But in what happened was Genghis Khan, as you may recall, conquered most of Asia.
Right, yeah.
And in fact, his and then his descendant Tamerlane's incursions into the Middle East delayed the utter destruction of the Byzantine Empire by decades, if not a century, simply because they put so much pressure on the Turks. And we know that some of the Mongol Khans became Nestorian Christians. So
Nestorian, isn't that a heresy?
Well, yes. Nestorianism is a heresy. The people that we call Nestorians today, however, don't really hold it.
Okay.
Basically, it was the idea that there are two persons in Christ, and that Mary is the mother of Christ, but not the mother of God.
Ah, yeah.
That's Nestorianism. But the Assyrians, as they're called today, do not believe that. One of the things you find in history is that when a group with the apostolic succession break off for heretical reasons, one thing or the other goes, either the heresy or the apostolic succession.
Okay, so, okay.
And in their case, the heresy went, they've got the apostolic succession.
Okay.
And then the number of them that have been reconciled to the church as a group are called the Chaldean Catholics.
Ah.
But they're a remnant, because this is a huge, by the by, but it's worth knowing. After Nestorius was condemned, his adherents fled to Persia. Now, the Persian government wanted to separate the Christians in their land from the Romans, because they saw the Christians in Persia as a sort of fifth column. So the Nestorians come along, and the Persian government literally put the church into their hands, because they see this as a way. I mean, they're Zoroastrian. They don't really care about Christian doctrine, but they are keen in driving a wedge between the Persian Christians and the Roman Christians.
Mm.
And if the Persian Christians are no longer in communion with Rome, then they can stop persecuting them.
I see.
Because persecution is hard. It takes time.
Yeah.
Effort. So they do that. And the Nestorian church spreads all the way through Persia, eastward along the Silk Route to China, the shipping routes down to India and Ceylon. And by about 1300, there were literally hundreds of Nestorian dioceses all throughout Asia. But the rise of the Mongols ruined a lot of that, oddly enough, because I've said, personally, I think the story of Prester John was based upon one or more Mongol Khans who converted to this kind of Christianity. And rumors of them came back west. That, I think, is probably the root. But in the end, the Mongol incursions had the effect of wiping out the Nestorian Church everywhere except the mountains of Iraq and Turkey and southern India. So, then the Portuguese came to southern India and they all became Catholic for a while. Then there was a split off. And now there are 5 different kinds of Christians in South India.
Okay.
All stemming from this Nestorian group. And in fact, a lot of the drama recently in Iraq has been ISIS slaughtering Chaldean and Assyrian and other Christians.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so that's my suspicion as to where the story of Prester John originates.
I see. One of the Mongol Khans that converted.
Yeah, and you know the idea was that he was just about to send forces to relieve the Christians in the Holy Land.
I see.
Would have been nice to have been true. And as I say, in reality, it did relieve pressure on Constantinople, the Mongols did.
Yeah.
For a century, perhaps.
Yeah. That Mongolian Empire always fascinates me because there's not a lot of talk about it. But wasn't it the largest empire ever at its
Oh no, that was the British Empire.
Oh,
but it was the largest continental empire.
Yeah, continental. Yeah.
Yeah, and it arose quickly and it fell quickly.
Yeah, I watched the video timeline where you just see it expanding so rapidly, and then it just falls apart.
And then it falls apart.
Fractures.
Because they had no genius for governing. They could conquer.
How did they conquer so well and so quickly?
Because their armies were amazing, and they made examples of. They would conquer a city. That if the city surrendered, then they would be accepted as part of the empire. If they refused and they had to actually take it, they'd all be killed and their skulls piled in pyramids.
Wow.
So after a while...
it got pretty easy. They didn't want to... Wow. Wow.
Then they conquered from Russia, the frontier of Poland, all the way to China and northern Vietnam. The only people who defeated them were the Japanese.
How were they able to do that?
The divine wind destroyed the Mongol fleet.
Well, the divine wind?
Kamikaze.
Oh, wow.
That's where the word comes from. And so when it looked as though Japan was going to fall to the Mongols, the Mongol fleet was destroyed and the Mongol soldiers left to the mercy of the Japanese.
Wow.
And so when they found themselves in a similar position in 1945, they gave the name to their suicide bombers.
Yeah, that's where I heard that, yeah.
It didn't work as well the second time.
Ah. How did the divine... I mean, you know, they don't have airplanes back in the day. How did they kamikaze? I don't know.
Well, no, they called the wind that came up and destroyed the Mongol fleet.
Oh.
They called it the divine wind, the kamikaze.
Oh, I see.
And so they were hoping they'd be able to do the same thing in 45. Didn't work out quite the same way.
I see.
Of course, there is the terrible joke about the Polish kamikaze.
Uh-oh. What?
50 successful missions.
50... What? Well, how could... That's an oxymoron, is it?
That's the point.
You're supposed to have one successful mission.
That's the point. 50 successful missions.
Why Poland, though?
Well, because they're the ones who get the jokes told. You can call it. You can use the Irish or the Caribbean if you want.
Okay.
Use whatever ethnic group you want to smack around that day. You hear about the famous French Canadian kamikaze?
Okay.
50 successful missions.
There you go.
You feel better now?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, they have it. Those French Canadians have it coming.
We already got it. It's very sad. All right.